"You're my past. She's my future," the Millionaire CEO said. But 5 years later, she arrived at his wedding with twins and his world fell apart. "Hi, my beautiful and loyal family. Welcome back to your own home, the Mr. Peters family. May the Almighty cloak every woman in unshakable courage, quiet dignity, and a peace that no betrayal can steal. May every scar soften into wisdom, and every night of crying rise as a dawn of strength and new beginnings. You are the warmth in cold seasons, the breath of hope after heartbreak, the grace that rebuilds what life tried to break. May your steps be steady, your heart guarded by faith, and your spirit forever unbreakable. My precious family, don't let your voice fade tonight. Your presence is the heartbeat of this home. A like is a candle of hope. A comment is a bridge of unity. This is Mission 1000 Blessings for every woman who keeps loving, keeps forgiving, keeps rising. If you carry strength in your soul, like this video, if your faith walks taller than your pain, comment, "I'm with Mr. Peter." The cathedral doors opened during the vows, and Natasha Corley walked through them like vengeance wrapped in silence. She wore black, not mourning black, but the kind of black that made every white dress in the room look like a surrender flag. Her hands held two small girls, twins with dark curls and eyes that could stop a heart. The priest's voice faltered mid-sentence. 300 guests turned in their seats with the synchronized horror of people watching a building collapse in real time. At the altar, Jeff Wildman felt his entire body turn to ice. "Jeff." She said his name once, just once, but it landed in that sacred space like a grenade, and everyone waited for the explosion. His bride, Simone Laurent, turned slowly from the priest to follow his gaze. She saw a woman she'd never met standing in the aisle with children who had Jeff's exact bone structure, his mouth, his devastating eyes. Simone was a smart woman. She'd always known Jeff didn't love her the way love was supposed to feel. She'd accepted that their marriage was strategic, beneficial, appropriate, but she'd believed he was honest. That particular illusion died in the 3 seconds it took for Jeff to whisper Natasha's name like it was being torn from his chest with barbed wire. The twins stared at their father with the kind of confusion children wear when the adults have stopped making sense. The smaller one, William, pressed closer to Natasha's leg. The other, Joe, studied Jeff with unsettling intensity, like she was memorizing his face for evidence. Simone's hands shook as she reached for her veil. She removed it with the careful precision of someone performing surgery on themselves without anesthesia. When she spoke, her voice carried to the back pews despite its quietness. "I knew you never loved me. I accepted that. I thought at least you were honest." She dropped the veil at his feet. The whisper of fabric hitting marble echoed through the cathedral like a gunshot. Then she placed her engagement ring on top of it, turned, and walked down the side aisle toward a door Jeff hadn't even known existed. Her bridesmaids scattered like startled birds. Jeff's mother, Corinne Wildman, stood from her front row seat with the kind of rage that makes the air itself dangerous. She moved toward Natasha with clear intent, to threaten, to intimidate, to make this nightmare go away through sheer force of will. But before she could speak, Natasha's voice cut through the chaos with surgical precision. Don't come near me, don't come near my daughters." Corinne stopped as if she'd hit an invisible wall. Natasha's gaze swept the room, landing on faces she recognized from old photographs, old stories, old wounds. When she spoke again, her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "You thought I wasn't good enough for your family, so you lied to your son about that inheritance clause. Yes, I know about the clause. I know everything." The cathedral erupted in whispers. Board members exchanged sharp glances. Distant relatives leaned toward each other with hungry expressions. Jeff's father, Sterling Wildman, went absolutely rigid in his seat. Natasha continued, relentless. "You decided I wasn't worthy of your bloodline, so you took him from me. But you didn't just take him, you took their father from them before they even existed." She placed her hands on the twins' shoulders, a gesture both protective and accusatory. "Look at them. Look at Joe and William, and tell me they weren't worth the truth." William started crying. The sound of a child's distress in that enormous space was unbearable. Joe remained silent, but her small face had gone very pale. Jeff finally moved, his legs unlocking from the paralysis that had frozen him. He took 2 steps toward them and said their names for the first time in his life. "Joe, William." Natasha moved between him and the children like a shield. "You don't get to speak to them, not here, not like this. You wanted your empire, Jeff. You wanted your perfect wedding and your perfect life, so here it is, everyone watching while it burns." She turned to leave, her daughters clutched close to her sides. Jeff did something desperate and stupid. He reached out and grabbed her arm. Not hard, not violently, but enough to stop her momentum. The entire cathedral gasped as one organism. Natasha looked down at his hand on her arm. Then she raised her eyes to his face, and her expression was so cold it felt like frostbite. "Let go of me, or I will scream, and security will remove you from your own wedding, and these 300 people will watch you get exactly what you deserve." His hand released her like she'd burned him. She walked out through those same cathedral doors with her daughters, and the silence she left behind was the kind that comes after natural disasters. Guests began standing, gathering their things, whispering urgently to each other. Some looked scandalized, others looked fascinated. All of them looked like they couldn't wait to tell this story to everyone they knew. The priest cleared his throat awkwardly and suggested perhaps they should all leave quietly. Jeff stood at the altar alone. His groomsmen had backed away without him noticing. His family remained frozen in their front row seats like wax figures in a museum of family destruction. When Jeff finally turned to face them, his father's expression told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't just a ruined wedding. This was a declaration of war. His sister Autumn appeared at his elbow, her voice barely audible. "Jeff, we need to get you out of here before the press shows up." But Jeff wasn't listening. He was staring at the doors Natasha had walked through, at the space where his children had stood, at the evidence of everything he'd destroyed. His mother approached him with fury in every line of her body. "You will fix this. You will explain to everyone that this woman is unstable, that those children are mine." Jeff's voice came out raw. "Those children are mine, and you knew what you took from me." Corinne's face went white. Sterling stood slowly, his hand on his wife's shoulder, his expression unreadable but terrifying in its control. "We'll discuss this at the estate, not here, not in front of them." He gestured to the remaining guests with clear contempt for witnesses. Jeff wanted to argue, wanted to scream, wanted to burn the entire cathedral down with everyone in it. But his father's grip on his shoulder was iron, and the look in his eyes made it clear that this conversation was inevitable. As they walked down the aisle, past abandoned flowers and shocked faces, Jeff felt something crack open in his chest. Not his heart. That had broken 6 years ago when he'd walked out of Natasha's apartment. This was something deeper. This was the sound of his entire life splitting in half, and he didn't know which side he'd end up on when the ground stopped shaking. The last thing he saw before the cathedral doors closed behind him was his mother's wedding planner weeping silently in the corner, her clipboard clutched to her chest, surrounded by the ruins of the perfect day that would never be salvaged. Chapter 2. The reckoning begins. Jeff found Natasha because he paid a hotel concierge more money than most people earned in a month to break every privacy policy the establishment had. She was staying at a boutique hotel near the waterfront, packing to leave when he arrived. He pounded on her door with the desperation of a drowning man, and when she opened it, the look on her face told him she'd been expecting this confrontation. She'd probably been preparing for it since she walked into that cathedral. "Get out," she said flatly. "No. Jeff, I will call security." "Then call them. But I'm not leaving until you explain why you hid my children from me for 5 years." The words hung between them like a lit fuse. Natasha's jaw tightened, and when she spoke, her voice could have cut glass. "You want to know why? Fine. 3 weeks after you told me I was your past, I found out I was pregnant." She moved away from the door, leaving it open in a clear challenge. Jeff stepped inside and closed it behind him. The hotel room was modest but neat, with the twins' stuffed animals on one bed and Natasha's laptop open on the desk, evidence of the life she'd built without him. "I sat in my bathroom with that test in my hands," Natasha continued, her back to him as she folded clothes with violent precision, "and I knew that if I told you, one of 3 things would happen. Either you'd feel obligated to destroy your empire for children you didn't choose, and you'd resent us forever. Or you'd offer me money to disappear, and I'd have to live knowing you paid me off like a problem to solve. Or worst of all, you'd want to co-parent while you built your life with someone else, and I'd watch you give another woman everything you promised me while I raised your children alone anyway." "So you made that decision for both of us," Jeff said, his voice rising. "You decided I didn't deserve to know I had children." Natasha spun around, and the fury in her eyes made him take a step back. "I decided I deserved better than being your obligation. I decided Joe and William deserve better than a father who was there out of guilt instead of love. I decided that watching you marry someone appropriate while I nursed your babies was more than I could survive. You had no right. I had every right." She threw the shirt she was holding onto the bed. "You made your choice when you walked out of my apartment. You chose your family's approval and your grandfather's company over me, over us. So I made my choice too. I chose survival." Jeff's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You should have told me. I deserved to know." "Deserved?" Natasha's laugh was bitter. "You want to talk about what you deserved? You deserved to watch me almost die bringing your children into this world. You deserved to see me hemorrhage so badly the doctors thought I wouldn't make it. You deserved to know I woke up alone in a hospital with 2 premature babies and no one to call, no one to help me, because the only person I'd ever let that close had already proven I wasn't worth fighting for." The blood drained from Jeff's face. "You almost died? I was in surgery for hours. They had to give me transfusions. The nurses kept asking who they should call, and I had no one. My mother was already gone. I had no family. And the man who put those babies in me had made it very clear I wasn't important enough to inconvenience his life for." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Jeff saw her fight to maintain control. She won the fight, but barely. "So don't stand in my hotel room 6 years later and tell me what I should have done. I did what I had to do to protect myself and my daughters from you." "From me?" Jeff's voice came out strangled. "I would never have hurt them. I would never have. You already did hurt them. You hurt them before they existed. You chose your empire over their chance to have a father who actually wanted them." She walked to the window, putting distance between them. "I couldn't let you do it again. I couldn't let you half commit to being their father, while you resented how they complicated your perfect life. That's not fair." "Nothing about this is fair, Jeff. Nothing about what you did to me was fair. Nothing about raising twins alone while working 80-hour weeks to afford rent was fair. Nothing about explaining to Joe why other kids have daddies and she doesn't was fair. Then let me fix it. He moved toward her. Let me meet them. Let me be their father. You don't get to just decide to be their father now that it's convenient. You don't get to walk back into their lives because your conscience finally woke up. Natasha, please. They're terrified of you. She turned from the window to face him. Did you notice that? How William cried and Joe wouldn't speak. They've spent their entire lives hearing that their father didn't want them. And then they meet you in the most traumatic way possible, and you think you can just fix that with good intentions. What do you want from me? Jeff's voice broke. What do I have to do? I want you to prove that you're not the man who walked away. I want you to prove that you choosing them now isn't just guilt or ego or whatever crisis you're having about your ruined wedding. She crossed her arms. But honestly, I don't think you can. I think you're the same man who looked me in the eyes and told me I was your past because it was easier than being brave. The words landed like physical blows. Jeff wanted to argue, to defend himself, to explain that he'd been lied to and manipulated. But looking at Natasha now, at the woman who'd survived childbirth and single parenthood and built a life from nothing, he realized she was right. He had taken the easy path. His family had given him an excuse, but he'd been looking for one. I can't change what I did, he said quietly. I can't go back and make different choices, but I can try to do better now. Can you? Because from where I'm standing, you're still the same Jeff. You still let other people decide what your life should look like. You were marrying a woman you didn't love because it was appropriate. You're here now because I forced you to see your children. You don't make choices, Jeff. You react to them. That's not true, isn't it? She picked up her phone from the nightstand. Here's your choice then. Leave right now and I'll disappear again. You can tell your family and friends that I'm unstable, that you don't believe the children are yours, whatever story makes your life easier. Or you can stay and fight for the right to know Joe and William. But it's going to be on my terms, and it's going to be harder than anything you've ever done. Jeff stared at her, at the woman he'd loved and lost and destroyed, at the mother of his children, at the person who'd survived everything he'd put her through and come out stronger while he'd just gotten weaker. What are your terms? Natasha's expression didn't soften, but something shifted in her eyes. Not forgiveness, not trust, but maybe the smallest possibility that he might be capable of earning both. You prove you've changed. You prove you can show up consistently, even when it's hard. You prove that being their father matters more than your comfort or your reputation or whatever your family thinks. She paused. And you accept that earning the right to be their father is separate from earning my forgiveness. You might achieve one without ever achieving the other. I'll do it, whatever it takes. We'll see. She opened the door, a clear dismissal. I'm not leaving the city yet. I'll contact you when I'm ready for you to meet them properly. Until then, stay away from us. Jeff walked to the door, then stopped in the threshold. For what it's worth, I never stopped loving you. Natasha's face went very still. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. That's the worst part, Jeff. I never stopped loving you either. I just learned that love isn't enough when the person you love is willing to sacrifice you for something easier. She closed the door in his face, and Jeff stood in the empty hallway listening to the sound of locks clicking into place, understanding for the first time that getting his children back wasn't the hard part. The hard part would be proving to Natasha that he was worth the risk of loving twice. Chapter 3. The Truth That Destroys Everything. The Wildman estate looked the same as it always had, imposing, immaculate, and absolutely soulless. But when Jeff walked through the front doors, it felt like entering a mausoleum. His sister Autumn was waiting in the foyer, her face pale with worry. She grabbed his arm before he could head toward their father's study. Don't go in there angry, she whispered urgently. "Mum's on the warpath, and Dad's in damage control mode. If you go in guns blazing, this gets ugly fast." "It's already ugly, Autumn. It's been ugly since they lied to me about that clause." "You don't know for sure that they—" "Yes, I do. Natasha knew about it, which means she did research I never bothered to do because I trusted my own family." He pulled his arm free. "Where are they?" "Study. But Jeff, please." He was already walking away. The study doors were heavy oak, and when he slammed them open, both his parents looked up from where they sat in matching leather chairs, drinks in hand, looking like they were discussing quarterly earnings instead of the complete destruction of their son's life. "We need to talk about the inheritance clause," Jeff said, not bothering with preamble. His father set down his scotch with deliberate calm. "I think we need to talk about your spectacularly poor judgment in keeping a relationship secret that produced children." "I didn't keep it secret. You knew about Natasha. You just decided she wasn't good enough." His mother's voice was ice. "That woman crashed your wedding with children she'd hidden from you for years, humiliated this entire family in front of everyone who matters, and you're defending her." "She had those children because I abandoned her based on a lie you told me." Jeff's voice rose. "So yes, I'm defending her. Now tell me about the clause." Sterling and Corinne exchanged a look that Jeff had seen 1,000 times growing up, the silent communication of parents deciding how to handle a difficult child. It made his blood boil. "Tell me," he repeated, "was the inheritance clause legally binding?" The silence stretched too long. Sterling stood, walked to the window, his back to Jeff. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "The clause was included in your grandfather's will. The lawyer advised us that such conditions are often challenged successfully, but that didn't mean—" "That's not what I asked." Jeff's hands clenched at his sides. "I asked if it was legally binding, yes or no." "These things are never entirely clear. Yes or no, Dad?" His father turned around, and for the first time in Jeff's life, he saw something that might have been shame in Sterling Wildman's eyes. "No, it wasn't binding." The word landed like a bullet. Jeff actually felt his knees weaken. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. "You knew. This entire time, you knew I didn't have to leave her, that I didn't have to sacrifice everything, that the company was never actually at risk." "It was more complicated than that," Corinne interjected. "The clause was your grandfather's dying wish. Even if it wasn't legally enforceable, honoring it was about respect for respect." Jeff's laugh came out strangled. "You want to talk about respect? You let me believe that staying with Natasha would destroy everything grandfather built. You let me think I had to choose between love and responsibility. You manipulated me into leaving the only woman I ever loved because you thought she wasn't good enough for our family." "She wasn't." His mother stood, her composure cracking. She had no family, no background, no understanding of what it means to be part of this world. You were infatuated with someone completely inappropriate, and yes, we gave you a reason to end it before you made a mistake that would have followed you forever. I have two daughters who don't know me, who are terrified of me, who have spent 5 years thinking their father didn't want them. That's the mistake that's going to follow me forever." "You should have used protection," Corinne snapped. "You should have been more careful. Don't blame us for your irresponsibility." Something in Jeff broke. The dutiful son, the respectful heir, the man who'd always tried to meet his parents' expectations, all of it shattered. "Get out," he said quietly. "Excuse me?" His mother's eyebrows rose. "This is your house, so I'll leave, but I'm done. Done with your manipulation, done with your prejudice, done with pretending that this family is worth preserving." He turned toward the door. "I'm going to know my daughters. I'm going to fix what you broke, and I'm resigning from the company effective immediately." "You'll do no such thing." Sterling's voice cracked like a whip. "You walk away now, especially after that disaster at the cathedral, and the board will replace you within the week. The hostile takeover attempts we've been fighting off will succeed. Everything your grandfather built will be carved up and sold to the highest bidder. Then let it burn. I already sacrificed everything that mattered for that company. I won't do it again." "Those children are not your responsibility until paternity is established," his mother said desperately. "That woman could be lying. She could have manipulated you into this entire situation. You need to think logically about—" "They have my eyes, Mom. My eyes. William has my smile. Joe has my hands. I don't need a paternity test to know they're mine. I just need you to leave me alone." He walked out before either parent could respond. In the hallway, Autumn was waiting, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know," she said, "about the clause. I swear I didn't know." "I believe you." He pulled her into a hug. "You're the only one in this family I still trust." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to be a father. A real one. Not the version Dad modeled for us. Distant and controlling and conditional. I'm going to be the father Joe and William deserve, even if it takes the rest of my life to earn that right." Autumn pulled back, searching his face. "Mom's going to fight you on this. She's already making calls. I heard her on the phone earlier, talking about reputation management and custody lawyers." "Let her try." Jeff's voice was steel. "She can take me to court. She can destroy my career. She can tell everyone in her social circle that I'm a disgrace. None of it matters anymore. The only thing that matters is those two little girls who looked at me like I was a stranger, because that's exactly what I am to them. They might never forgive you. You know that, right? You might do everything right from here on out, and they might still never trust you. I know, but I have to try. Because the alternative is living the rest of my life knowing I had daughters I never fought for, and I've already done that for 5 years. I can't do it for one more day." Autumn hugged him again, tighter this time. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing." "Yeah?" "Yeah. Terrifying and possibly suicidal from a career standpoint, but right." Jeff almost smiled. Then his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. When he opened it, his breath caught. "Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., Riverside Park near the fountain. 30 minutes. Don't be late. Natasha." He showed Autumn the message, and she squeezed his shoulder. "Don't mess this up." "I won't," Jeff said, though he had no idea if that was a promise he could keep. But as he walked out of his parents' estate, possibly for the last time as their son, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not hope, exactly. Not redemption. But the smallest possibility that the man he'd become might be capable of earning back what the man he'd been had thrown away. Behind him, through the study windows, he could see his parents standing together in the lamplight, united in their disappointment. Ahead of him was his car, the city, and somewhere in it, 2 little girls who might someday call him Dad without fear in their voices. He chose ahead. For the first time in 6 years, Jeff Wildman chose the harder path without anyone forcing him to take it. Chapter 4. The Fortress She Built. Jeff arrived at Riverside Park 20 minutes early and spent the entire time watching the fountain like it held answers it would never give him. When Natasha appeared with the twins, his heart stopped. In daylight, away from the cathedral's chaos, he could see them clearly. Joe had Natasha's fierce intelligence in her eyes, but his stubbornness in the set of her jaw. William had his smile, the one Jeff only showed when he forgot to guard himself, but Natasha's warmth underneath it. They were wearing matching backpacks with cartoon characters he didn't recognize, holding their mother's hands like lifelines. Natasha sat on a bench near the fountain, positioning the twins on either side of her, like bookends. Jeff approached slowly, the way you'd approach a wounded animal that might bolt. "Thank you for coming," he said, directing it to all three of them, but looking at Natasha because the twins wouldn't meet his eyes. "We're here because they asked questions I couldn't answer anymore," Natasha said quietly. "Not because I think this is a good idea." William peeked at Jeff from behind his mother's shoulder. Joe stared at the fountain with absolute concentration, clearly determined to pretend Jeff didn't exist. "Can I sit?" Jeff asked. "On that bench." Natasha indicated one several feet away. "We're not ready for close proximity yet." He sat where directed, feeling like he was in a hostage negotiation, where he was somehow both hostage and hostage-taker. The silence stretched uncomfortably until William's curiosity apparently won over his fear. "Do you have a dog?" William asked suddenly. "No. Do you want one?" "Mommy says we can't have pets in our apartment, but I want a dog named Thunder." "Thunder's a good name." "Joe wants a cat named Library." Jeff glanced at Joe, who was still determinedly ignoring him. "Library." "Because she likes books," William explained with the patience of someone used to translating his sister. "She reads all the time, even at breakfast. Mommy has to take books away so she'll eat." "What kind of books?" "Stories about dragons mostly, and one about a girl who lives in a tree, and one about—" "William, stop talking," Joe said suddenly, her voice small but firm. "We're not supposed to like him yet." The words hit Jeff like a punch to the sternum. Natasha's face remained neutral, but he caught the tightness around her mouth that meant she was fighting some emotion she wouldn't show him. "You don't have to like me," Jeff said carefully. "I just want to know you." "Why?" Joe finally looked at him, and her eyes were devastating in their directness. "You didn't want to know us before. I didn't know you existed before. But you didn't want Mommy anymore. So even if you knew about us, you wouldn't have wanted us either." Jeff felt Natasha tense beside the twins, but she didn't intervene. This was a test, he realized. She wanted to see how he'd handle the hard questions. "Your mom is right that I made a terrible choice," Jeff said slowly. "I let my family tell me I had to choose between people I loved and work I thought mattered. I chose work. That was the worst mistake I ever made." "Do you still do that work?" William asked. "Not anymore?" "Why?" "Because I realized the work didn't matter as much as the people I lost." Joe's expression didn't soften. "So you only came back because you lost your work, not because you wanted us?" The question was so brutally perceptive that Jeff had to look away for a moment. When he looked back, both twins were watching him with identical expressions of skepticism that definitely came from their mother. "I came back because I found out you existed. And yes, losing my work made it easier to make that choice. But Joe—" He leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. "Even if I still had that job, I'd be here, because you and William are my daughters, and I should have been here from the beginning." "You can't prove that," Joe said. "You can only say it." "She's right." Natasha spoke for the first time since they'd sat down. "So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to prove it by showing up. Every week, same time, same place, for as long as it takes for them to trust you. You're going to answer their questions honestly, even when the answers make you look bad. And you're going to accept that this is going to be slow and painful, and there's no guarantee they'll ever feel safe with you. I can do that. We'll see." Natasha checked her watch. 20 more minutes. Then we leave." The 20 minutes were excruciating. William asked questions about Jeff's childhood, his favorite foods, whether he could juggle. Jeff answered as honestly as he could, while Joe sat in silence, occasionally whispering things to her mother that Jeff couldn't hear. When time was up, Natasha stood, and the twins scrambled to their feet like they'd been waiting for permission to escape. "Same time next week?" Jeff asked. "If they want to come back." Natasha looked down at the twins. "Do you want to see him again?" William nodded immediately. Joe took longer, studying Jeff with those unsettling eyes that saw too much. Finally, she shrugged. I guess. It was the smallest concession imaginable, but Jeff felt it like sunlight after years of winter. They left, the twins flanking their mother, and Jeff sat on the bench watching them go. He pulled out his phone and found a message from Autumn. How'd it go? He typed back. They hate me. Her response came immediately. That's a start. Autumn was right. Hate meant emotion. Hate meant they cared enough to have an opinion. Complete indifference would have been worse. Jeff stood, pocketed his phone, and walked back to his car with the echo of Joe's voice in his head. You can only say it. She was right. Words meant nothing. He'd told Natasha he loved her and still walked away. He'd told himself he was doing the right thing and destroyed both their lives. Words were the cheapest currency in the world, so he'd have to pay in something more expensive. Time, consistency, presence, the slow, grinding work of becoming someone his daughters could trust. He drove back to his apartment, smaller now, cheaper, in a neighborhood where no one knew his name, and spent the rest of the day researching books about dragons. If Joe liked dragons, he'd learn everything there was to know about dragons. If William wanted a dog named Thunder, Jeff would figure out how to make that happen somehow. It was pathetic, probably, desperate, the actions of a man trying to buy love with knowledge about fictional creatures and pet names. But it was all he had. And if Joe was right that he could only prove himself through actions, then he'd act every single day until his daughters looked at him without fear, until Natasha looked at him without the careful blankness she wore like armor. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Jeff Wildman? Speaking. This is Beverly Fletcher from the company's board of directors. I'm calling to inform you that a vote was held this afternoon regarding your position as CEO. Jeff closed his eyes. Here it came. The final collapse of everything his grandfather had built. I'm no longer CEO. That's correct. The board felt that given recent events and your stated intention to resign, it was better to make a clean transition. Your severance package will be... I don't want it. Silence on the other end. I'm sorry. The severance. Give it to the employees who'll lose their jobs in the restructuring. I don't need it. Mr. Wildman, it's a significant amount of money. You should really consider... I've considered. I don't want it. Is that all? Yes. Yes. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Jeff hung up without saying goodbye. The CEO position was gone. The company his grandfather had spent 60 years building would be dismantled within months. His parents would never forgive him. His name would be synonymous with failure in every business circle that mattered. And somehow, for the first time in years, Jeff felt like he could breathe. He opened his laptop and started searching for apartments in Natasha's neighborhood. Closer proximity meant more chances to see the twins, to be available, to prove through sheer stubborn presence that he wasn't going anywhere. He found a place, nothing special, just a 2-bedroom with decent light, and submitted an application before he could talk himself out of it. Then he opened a document and started writing. Dear Joe and William felt too formal. Dear Daughters felt presumptuous. He settled on just their names. Joe and William, I don't know if your mum will show you this, but I'm writing it anyway. Today was hard. I know you don't trust me. I know I'm basically a stranger who crashed into your lives in the worst possible way, but I want you to know that I'm going to show up every week. I'm going to answer your questions. I'm going to learn about dragons and dogs and whatever else matters to you, not because I think it'll make you instantly love me, but because you deserve a father who tries. I'm going to try, even when it's hard, even when you hate me, even when your mom looks at me like I'm the biggest mistake she ever made. I'm going to try. Love, Jeff. He read it over 3 times, changed "Love Jeff" to "Sincerely Jeff", then changed it back. Then he saved it without sending it because he didn't have their email address, and asking Natasha for it felt like pushing too hard too fast. Outside his window, the city continued its indifferent existence. Tomorrow he'd wake up without a job, without his family's approval, without any clear path forward. But he'd also wake up knowing he had another week to earn 30 more minutes with his daughters. It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. But it was a start. And starting was the only thing left that Jeff Wildman knew how to do. Chapter 5. The Price of Access. The co-parenting therapist's office smelled like lavender and felt like a courtroom where Jeff was perpetually on trial. Dr. Helena Price was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for excuses. Their first session happened without the twins, just Jeff and Natasha, sitting on opposite ends of a couch that might as well have been a canyon. "Let's establish something immediately," Dr. Price said, her pen poised over a notepad. "This isn't couples therapy. You're not here to fix your relationship. You're here to figure out how to raise children together when you've got more history than trust. Natasha, why don't you start by explaining your concerns?" Natasha sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap, and proceeded to methodically dismantle every illusion Jeff had about his ability to parent. "My concern is that Jeff is here out of guilt rather than genuine commitment. That when being a father stops being convenient or stops making him feel better about himself, he'll disappear. And my daughters will lose their father twice instead of once." Dr. Price turned to Jeff. "Response. I'm not going anywhere." "That's not a response, that's a statement. Why should Natasha believe you?" Jeff met Natasha's eyes across the couch. "Because I've already lost everything else. My job, my family, my reputation. The only things I have left worth fighting for are sitting in a park every week, afraid to get too close to me. I can't afford to lose them again." "So you're here because you have nothing else left?" Dr. Price's eyebrows rose. "That's not particularly reassuring." "No?" Jeff leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm here because losing everything else finally made me see what actually mattered. I should have seen it 6 years ago. I didn't, but I see it now." The session continued like that for an hour, Natasha listing her fears, Jeff trying to prove he'd changed, Dr. Price cutting through both their defenses with surgical precision. By the end, Jeff felt emotionally eviscerated. "Homework," Dr. Price announced as they stood to leave. "Jeff, you're going to write down 3 specific ways you'll prove consistency over the next month. Natasha, you're going to write down 3 things that would make you trust him even slightly more. Next session, we'll see if there's any overlap." In the parking lot, Natasha walked to her car without looking back. Jeff called after her. "How are they? Joe and William?" She stopped, keys in hand. "Joe's been having nightmares. William's been asking why you can't come over for dinner if you're their dad." "Can I?" "No." "Natasha, you get 30 minutes once a week. That's it. Until I see proof that you're not going to break their hearts the way you broke mine." She drove away before he could respond. The weeks that followed were the hardest work Jeff had ever done. Every Saturday morning, same fountain, same bench. William slowly opened up, telling Jeff about school and friends and the elaborate games he invented involving superhero dinosaurs. Joe remained guarded, but started asking questions, always the hard ones. "Do you have a girlfriend?" "No." "Did you love the lady you were supposed to marry?" "No." "Then why were you marrying her?" "Because I was trying to be the person my family wanted me to be, instead of the person I actually was." "That's stupid." "You're right. It was stupid." Joe considered this. "Mommy cries sometimes, at night when she thinks we're asleep." Jeff's chest constricted. "Because of me?" "I think so, but she won't say." He wanted to ask more, but Joe had already turned back to the fountain, subject closed. Progress came in microscopic increments. William let Jeff push him on the swings. Joe showed him a drawing she'd made of a dragon. When Jeff asked if he could keep it, she shrugged, but he saw the pleased flush on her cheeks. Then came the breakthrough Jeff hadn't earned but received anyway. It was their 8th visit. Jeff brought books about dragons he'd found at a specialty bookstore. Joe's eyes widened when she saw them, but she tried to hide her excitement. William bounced on his toes. "Can we look at them now?" Natasha glanced at Jeff, then at the twins. 10 minutes. Then we need to go." William dragged Jeff to a different bench, opening the first book immediately. Joe followed more slowly, sitting on Jeff's other side, but maintaining careful distance. They read together, William narrating enthusiastically, Joe silent but absorbed. Then William leaned against Jeff's shoulder. It was unconscious, natural, the way children lean into adults they trust. Jeff froze, terrified that moving would break whatever spell had been cast. Joe glanced at her brother, then at Jeff, and something in her expression softened microscopically. "This one's wrong," she said, pointing to an illustration. "Dragons are supposed to have longer tails." "You're probably right. You know more about dragons than whoever drew this." "Obviously." They finished the book. When Natasha called time, William complained but stood. Joe stood too, then did something that stopped Jeff's heart. She reached out and took the book from his hands, held it against her chest, and looked at him with those devastating eyes. "Can I borrow this?" "You can have it." "No, borrow. I'll give it back next time." Jeff understood. Having it meant obligation. Borrowing it meant she'd have to see him again to return it. It was insurance against him disappearing. "Okay, you can borrow it." She nodded once, satisfied, and walked back to her mother. Jeff stood on shaking legs, watching them leave, and realized he was crying. Not dramatically, just quiet tears he wiped away before Natasha could see. His phone rang. Autumn. "Hey, how are the visits going?" "William leaned on me today." "That's good? It's everything." In therapy, Dr. Price made them discuss boundaries. Natasha wanted Jeff to submit to a background check, to prove financial stability, to agree to supervised visits for at least 6 more months. Jeff agreed to everything without argument. The background check came back clean. His consulting work was paying enough to live on. The supervised visits continued. But something was shifting between him and Natasha. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a cautious acknowledgement that he was showing up, that he was trying, that maybe he wasn't the man who'd walked away anymore. After one therapy session, they sat in the parking lot longer than usual. "They're getting attached to you," Natasha said quietly. "It terrifies me. It terrifies me too. If you hurt them, I won't. You can't promise that. People hurt each other. It's inevitable. Then I promise that if I do hurt them, it won't be because I left. It won't be because I chose something else over them. It'll be because I'm human and flawed, but I was there trying." Natasha stared through the windshield at nothing. "I watched you hold William that day with the dragon books. I watched Joe let herself care about whether you'd be there next week, and I felt this panic like I was watching them walk toward a cliff. I know I destroyed your ability to trust me. I know I don't deserve—" "Stop!" She turned to face him. "Stop talking about what you deserve. This isn't about you. It's about them, and they need their father, even if their father is you. Even if it means I have to find a way to forgive you enough to let you into their lives without destroying myself in the process. I don't know how to make it easier for you. You can't. You can only keep showing up." She reached for the door handle. 2 more months of supervised visits. Then we'll discuss unsupervised time. But Jeff, if you mess this up, if you prove me wrong about giving you this chance, I will disappear again. And this time, you'll never find us." She left him sitting in his car with the weight of her threat settling into his bones. Not a threat, really. A promise. And a fair one. Jeff drove home to his small apartment and sat at his kitchen table with a calendar. He marked every visit, every therapy session, every small victory. William's lean, Joe's borrowed book. The day William called him Dad for the first time, accidentally, while asking for a push on the swing, but it counted. He was building something, slowly, painfully, from the ruins of what he'd destroyed. It wasn't the empire his grandfather had built. It wasn't the life his parents had envisioned for him. But it was real. And for the first time since he'd walked out of Natasha's apartment 6 years ago, Jeff felt like he was becoming someone his daughters might actually be proud to call their father. The path ahead was still uncertain. Natasha was still walled off, protecting herself from the possibility of being hurt again. Joe was still testing him with hard questions. William was open but young enough that his trust could shatter easily. Everything was fragile and provisional, and one mistake away from collapse. But Jeff had learned something in the past months. The work of becoming a good father wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It was about showing up to a park bench every Saturday. It was about reading books about dragons even when you didn't understand the appeal. It was about accepting that love had to be earned through consistency, not claimed through biology. He was earning it. 1 30-minute visit at a time. 1 borrowed book. 1 accidental dad. 1 small lean against his shoulder that felt like forgiveness, even though it wasn't. Even though forgiveness might never come. But maybe, Jeff thought as he marked another week on his calendar, maybe that was enough. Maybe being there was the only thing that mattered. Maybe he'd finally learned the lesson Natasha had tried to teach him 6 years ago. Love isn't about choosing the easy path. It's about choosing the person again and again, even when everything else is screaming at you to let go. This time, Jeff wasn't letting go. This time, he was holding on with everything he had. And if that meant sitting on a park bench for the rest of his life, waiting for his daughters to trust him, then that's exactly what he'd do. Chapter 6. The War on All Fronts. The lawsuit arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who made Jeff sign for his own destruction. Corinne Wildman was petitioning for emergency custody evaluation, claiming Natasha had engaged in parental alienation by keeping the children secret, and that Jeff's rights as a father were being violated through restricted access. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. His mother was trying to force Natasha into submission by threatening everything she'd built. Jeff's hands shook as he read it. Then he called Natasha. "I know," she said before he could speak. "I got served an hour ago." "I didn't know she was doing this, I swear. Your lawyer's signature is on the filing." Jeff's blood turned to ice. "What?" "Theodore Brennan. Your family's lawyer for 30 years. His name is right here on the petition." "Natasha, I didn't authorize this. I didn't even know—" Jeff was already grabbing his keys, heading for the door. "I'm fixing this right now." "Don't bother. Your mother made her move. Now I make mine." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done playing nice. It means if she wants a war, she's going to get one. And Jeff, you need to decide whose side you're on, because you can't be on both." She hung up. Jeff drove to his mother's house fast enough that he probably should have been pulled over. He found her in the conservatory, tending to her orchids with the calm of someone who'd just done something perfectly reasonable. "How could you?" he said from the doorway. Corinne didn't look up from her pruning shears. "How could I what? Protect my son's parental rights? Ensure my grandchildren aren't being raised by someone who's proven she'll use them as leverage?" "They're not leverage. They're children," My children. And you just declared war on their mother. I declared that your relationship with them should be formalized legally instead of at that woman's whim. If she has nothing to hide, she'll welcome the court's involvement. Jeff walked into the conservatory, and his mother finally looked up. Whatever she saw in his face made her take a step back. You're going to withdraw that petition today. I most certainly will not. Those children deserve to know their father properly, and if that woman won't allow appropriate access. Those children are terrified of me because I'm a stranger. They're slowly learning to trust me because Natasha is letting me earn that trust at a pace that makes sense for them. You filing a custody motion isn't about protecting them. It's about controlling me. It's about ensuring you don't lose your rights to children that woman hid from you for 5 years. She hid them because I gave her every reason to believe I'd be a terrible father. Jeff's voice rose. Because I chose this family's approval over the woman I loved. Because I let you lie to me about that clause, and I believed it because some part of me wanted an excuse to take the easy path. She was protecting them from me, and she was right to do it. Corinne's face went cold. So you're choosing her. Again. Even after everything she's done. Everything she's done? Jeff laughed, and it came out broken. Everything she's done is survive what I put her through. She almost died bringing my daughters into the world. She raised them alone while I was building an empire that's falling apart anyway. She gave me a chance to know them, even though every instinct she has is telling her, I'll hurt them the way I hurt her. What have you done? You lied, you manipulated, and now you're trying to destroy the only person who's actually protecting my children's well-being. I'm protecting you. No, you're protecting your image, your legacy, your idea of what this family should look like. You're not protecting me. You've never protected me. You've just tried to shape me into something you could control. His mother's hands tightened on her pruning shears. If you walk away from this family again, I'm not walking away. You're pushing me out, and I'm letting you. Because Joe and William need a father who will choose them first. Always, no matter what it costs. He turned toward the door. Withdraw the petition, or I'll file a declaration with the court saying I oppose it, that Natasha has full custody, and that you're acting against my wishes. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. He left before she could respond. His phone was already ringing. Autumn. Tell me you didn't know, Jeff said instead of hello. I found out this morning. Dad told me at breakfast like he was announcing a business merger. Jeff, I tried to talk them out of it. It's too late. The damage is done. Now I have to prove to Natasha that I'm not part of this. How? By burning every bridge they think will bring me back. He hung up and called Theodore Brennan. The lawyer answered with the smooth professionalism of someone who'd been expecting this call. Jeff, I can explain. Did I authorize you to file that custody petition? Your mother felt it was in your best interest. Did I authorize it? Silence. No, you didn't. Then you're going to file a withdrawal motion today, and you're going to include a statement that I oppose the petition and fully support Natasha's custody. And if you don't, I'm filing a formal complaint with the bar about you acting without client authorization. Jeff, think about what you're doing. Your mother is trying to help you. My mother is trying to control me. It's different. You have until end of business today. He ended the call. Then he did something that felt like jumping off a cliff. He called Natasha's lawyer, a woman named Ruth Flores, who had a reputation for destroying opposition in family court. Mr. Wildman, she answered, I was expecting your attorney to call. I don't have an attorney. I'm not fighting Natasha's custody. I'm supporting it. A pause. I'm sorry, what? My mother filed that petition without my knowledge or consent. I'm filing a declaration opposing it. I want it on record that I believe Natasha should have full custody, that our current arrangement is working, and that my mother's action is not in my children's best interest. That's unexpected. Why are you telling me this? Because I need Natasha to know I'm on her side, and I need it documented before this turns into a courtroom battle. Hold on. He heard muffled conversation, then Natasha's voice came on the line. Is this real or a strategy? It's real. I'm getting the petition withdrawn today, and I'm filing a declaration that says you're an excellent mother and my mother is acting against my wishes. More silence. Why? Because you are an excellent mother. Because Joe and William need you, and anyone trying to take them away from you is wrong. Because I'm done letting my family decide what my life should look like. This will destroy your relationship with them, permanently. It's already destroyed, I'm just making it official. He heard her breath catch. Jeff, I know it doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't make up for what I did to you. But I need you to know that when it comes down to it, when I have to choose, I'm choosing you and the twins, every time, no matter what. I need to go. Her voice was tight. Ruth, I'll call you back. The line went dead. Jeff sat in his car outside his mother's house and waited for the inevitable explosion. It came in the form of his father calling, his voice colder than Jeff had ever heard it. You're making a mistake. No, I'm fixing one. If you publicly oppose your mother's petition, the board will see it as further instability. The hostile takeover will succeed. Everything your grandfather built will be gone. I know. Let it go, Dad. I already have. You're choosing that woman and her children over your family legacy. Those children are my family legacy now, and that woman has been more honest with me in 3 months than you and Mom have been in my entire life. Sterling was quiet for a long moment. If you do this, you're no longer part of this family. Then I guess I'm not part of this family. Jeff hung up. His hands were shaking. His heart was racing. He felt like he'd just set fire to his entire world and was watching it burn. But underneath the fear and grief, there was something else. Something that felt like freedom. By evening, the legal filings were complete. Jeff's declaration was submitted to the court. Theodore Brennan filed the withdrawal motion. The custody petition was dead, and Jeff's opposition to it was now public record. His phone exploded with messages from business contacts, family friends, society people who'd watched his life implode with fascinated horror. He ignored all of them. There was only one person whose response mattered. Natasha called after the twins were asleep. You really did it. I really did it. You know what this means, right? Your family won't forgive you. The company's going to fall apart. You'll be free. Jeff leaned against his kitchen counter. For the first time in my life, I'll be free to make my own choices. That's terrifying. Yeah, it really is. She was quiet for a long time. Thank you for choosing them, for choosing us. I should have done it 6 years ago. You weren't ready 6 years ago. Hell, I'm not sure you're ready now, but at least you're trying. Is trying enough? I don't know yet. But her voice had softened. Ask me again in 6 months. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was the first time Natasha had given him a timeline for when things might be different. And Jeff held onto that like a lifeline as his phone continued buzzing with messages from a family that no longer claimed him, from a company that was collapsing without him, from a world that was moving on while he stood still in his small apartment, choosing the harder path because it was the only one that led to his daughters. Outside, the city lights flickered. Inside, Jeff made himself dinner and thought about Saturday's park visit. William would probably want to play on the swings. Joe would probably bring more questions designed to test whether he'd really stay. Natasha would watch from her bench with careful eyes, looking for signs that he'd crack under the pressure of everything he'd lost. And Jeff would show up. Again. Like he'd shown up every week before. Like he'd show up every week after. Because he'd finally learned that love wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices. It was about consistency, presence, the quiet work of proving yourself worthy of trust. He'd lost his empire, his family, his reputation. But he was earning something more valuable, the right to be called Dad. Chapter 7. The Ghost Between Them. The first unsupervised visit happened on a Saturday that felt like walking a tightrope without a net. Natasha brought the twins to Jeff's apartment, and her inspection of the space was thorough enough to make him grateful he'd spent the previous day cleaning obsessively. She checked the locks on the windows, the contents of his refrigerator, the emergency numbers he'd posted by the phone. The twins watched their mother's ritual with solemn understanding. They knew this was a test. 4 hours, Natasha said, standing at the door with her purse clutched like a shield. I'll be back at 2. If anything goes wrong, I'll call immediately. If they want to leave early, I'll bring them to you. If they're upset or scared or… Natasha! Jeff caught her gaze. I've got them, I promise. She looked at Joe and William. You two behave, and if you need me, Dad has my number. Dad. Not Jeff. Not him. Dad. It was the first time Natasha had called him that in front of the twins, and the word hung in the air like a blessing. Then she left, and Jeff was alone with his daughters for the first time in their lives. The first 30 minutes were awkward. The twins explored his apartment with careful curiosity, touching things gently, as if everything might break. William found the stack of superhero movies Jeff had bought and bounced excitedly. Joe discovered the bookshelf Jeff had filled with dragon stories and fantasy novels, and her eyes went wide. Can we really watch movies? William asked. That's why I got them. Can I really read these? Joe ran her finger along the spines. They're yours. I got them for you. Something in Joe's expression shifted. You bought all these just for me. Well, I was hoping you'd read them here, but if you want to take some home, that's okay too. Joe pulled out a thick volume about a girl who trains dragons, holding it like it might disappear. This one's been on my wish list forever. Mommy said it was too expensive. It's yours now. She looked up at him with those devastating eyes that saw everything. Why are you being so nice to us? Because you're my daughters, and I love you. But you didn't even know us until the wedding. Jeff sat down on his couch, and after a moment, both twins came over, not sitting next to him, but close enough to hear him clearly. You're right. I didn't know you. But Joe, I knew I loved you the second I saw you in that cathedral. I looked at you and William, and I saw everything I'd lost, everything I'd given up, and I knew I'd spend the rest of my life trying to earn the right to be your father. That's not how love works, Joe said skeptically. You can't just love someone you don't know. You're right again. So let me try differently. Every week when I see you, I learn something new. I learned William loves dinosaurs and superheroes. I learned you love dragons and reading. I learned you both hate broccoli but love strawberries. And every new thing I learn makes me love you more. Not because you're perfect, but because you're you. Does that make sense? Joe considered this seriously. I guess. William, more impulsive, climbed onto the couch next to Jeff. Can we watch a movie now? They watched 2 movies. William sat pressed against Jeff's side, occasionally commenting on the action. Joe sat on the floor with her new book, glancing up at the screen during exciting parts, but mostly absorbed in her reading. At lunchtime, Jeff made sandwiches that were slightly lopsided but edible, and William declared them pretty good for Dad sandwiches. After lunch, William wanted to play a game where dinosaurs fought superheroes, and Jeff had to voice all the characters. Joe sat at the table reading, but occasionally interjected with plot suggestions that were inevitably better than anything Jeff came up with. And somewhere in the middle of pretending a toy T-Rex could fly, Jeff realized this was the happiest he'd been in years. When Natasha came back, she found them mid-game. William was standing on the couch directing action. Joe was laughing at Jeff's terrible superhero voice, and Jeff was on his knees roaring like a dinosaur. They all froze when the door opened, caught in the moment like a photograph. "Hi, Mommy!" William bounced off the couch. "Dad makes the funniest voices, and we watched movies and ate sandwiches, and Joe's reading a whole new book." Natasha looked at her daughters, then at Jeff, still kneeling on the floor, and something in her carefully controlled expression cracked. "Sounds like you had fun." "So much fun." William hugged her legs. "Can we come back next week?" "We'll see." But Joe was watching her mother's face, reading the micro-expressions that most people missed. "You're surprised?" "A little," Natasha admitted. "You thought Dad would mess up." "I thought it might be harder than it was." Joe looked at Jeff, then back at her mother. "It wasn't hard. It was actually nice." Those 3 words, "it was actually nice," felt like winning the lottery. Jeff watched Natasha process her daughter's assessment, saw her fighting whatever emotions were threatening to surface. "Get your things," Natasha said quietly. "We need to go." The twins gathered their stuff. William hugged Jeff goodbye without hesitation. Joe paused at the door, then walked back and hugged him too. Quickly, awkwardly, but genuine. Then they were gone, and Jeff was alone in his apartment that still smelled like popcorn and children's shampoo. His phone buzzed an hour later. Natasha. "They haven't stopped talking about today." "Good stop talking or bad stop talking?" "Good. William wants to know when he can come back. Joe asked if you'd help her build a dragon habitat out of cardboard boxes." Jeff's throat tightened. "I would love to help with that." "I know. That's the problem." "Why is that a problem?" A long pause. "Because they're getting attached. Because I'm running out of reasons to keep my walls up. Because every time I see you with them, I remember why I fell in love with you in the first place, and I can't afford to go there again." "Natasha, don't. Please don't say whatever you're about to say. I'm not ready." "What if I am?" "Then you wait until I am too, or you accept that I might never be." She hung up before he could respond. Jeff sat in his quiet apartment and felt the weight of what she'd admitted. She was remembering why she loved him. That should have felt like victory, but it felt more like responsibility. Because if she let herself love him again and he failed her, it wouldn't just destroy her, it would destroy Joe and William too. The next visit, Natasha stayed. Not hovering, but present, working on her laptop at his kitchen table while the twins played. Jeff caught her watching him with Joe and William, and when their eyes met, she looked away quickly. But not before he saw it. The softness she was trying so hard to hide. After the twins left, she lingered at the door. "You're good with them," she said quietly. "I'm trying to be." "No, you are. William follows you around like you hung the moon. And Joe actually laughs now. She didn't laugh much after..." She stopped herself. "She laughs now. She didn't laugh much after what?" Natasha's expression shuttered. "After I realized I was raising them alone. After I stopped being able to pretend their father might come back someday. She picked up on my sadness, and she got quieter, more serious. I hated that I did that to her." Jeff wanted to reach for her hand, but knew she'd pull away. "You didn't do anything to her. You survived. You kept them safe. You were an incredible mother under impossible circumstances. I was angry at you, at myself, at the situation, and my daughters absorbed that anger because children absorb everything. And now they're laughing again because you're here, because you're actually trying. She finally met his eyes. I don't know how to feel about that. You don't have to know. You just have to let me keep showing up. That's all you ever say. Show up. Be consistent. Try. Because that's all I can do. I can't go back and fix what I broke. I can only build something new. Natasha's hands tightened on her purse strap. Do you ever think about what we could have been if you hadn't walked away? Every single day, we would have had this from the beginning. Joe and William would have grown up with both of us. We could have been a family. We could have been, Jeff agreed. We're not. But maybe we could become one, eventually, if you'll let us try. She shook her head slowly. I don't know if I'm that brave. You survived childbirth alone. You raised twins by yourself. You walked into my wedding and faced down everyone who ever made you feel less than. You're the bravest person I know. That's different. That's survival. This is... She gestured helplessly between them. This is choosing to trust someone who already broke me. That's not bravery. That's stupidity. Or it's faith. I don't have faith anymore, Jeff. You killed it when you chose your empire over me. The words should have hurt, but they just felt true. They stood in his doorway, all the history and hurt and possibility hanging between them like smoke. Then I'll have faith for both of us, Jeff said quietly, until you're ready to have it again. Natasha left without responding, but the next day she texted him, Joe wants to know if you're free Saturday afternoon for dragon habitat construction. Jeff responded immediately, absolutely. She sent back, bring cardboard and tape, lots of tape. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't love, but it was Saturday afternoons and dragon habitats and slowly, carefully, the rebuilding of something that might someday feel like family. And for now, that was enough. For now, Jeff would show up with cardboard and tape and hope, and he'd build whatever his daughters needed him to build. Dragon habitats, trust, proof that he was staying. Because somewhere between park benches and movie marathons and terrible dad sandwiches, he'd stopped trying to earn back what he'd lost and started trying to build something new. Something that hadn't existed before. Something that might be stronger for having been broken and rebuilt by people who knew exactly how fragile it was. His phone buzzed again. Autumn. Mom's not speaking to anyone. Dad's locked himself in his study. The company's being dissolved. How are you so calm? Jeff looked around his small apartment, at the stack of dragon books, the superhero movies, the cardboard boxes waiting for Saturday. At the evidence of a life that was smaller but infinitely more valuable than anything he'd had before. Because I finally know what matters, he told his sister, and it's not any of the things I thought it was. What matters? Saturday afternoons, and daughters who are learning to trust me, and a woman who might someday forgive me if I'm patient enough and consistent enough and good enough to deserve it. Autumn was quiet. You really love her. Still, after everything. I never stopped. And she knows that? She knows. She's just deciding if she can survive loving me back. What if she decides she can't? Then I'll keep being the best father I can be to Joe and William, and I'll accept that being in her life as their dad is more than I deserve anyway. That's incredibly sad, Jeff. Or incredibly hopeful. Depends on how you look at it. He hung up and started gathering cardboard boxes, already planning the dragon habitat in his head. Already thinking about how Joe's face would light up when they finished it. Already counting down the days until Saturday when he got to show up again, prove himself again, choose his daughters again. Because that's what love looked like now. Not grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, just cardboard and tape and consistency, just showing up when you said you would, just being the person you should have been from the beginning and hoping it was enough. Chapter 8. The complication that changes everything. The dragon habitat was almost finished when Natasha's doorbell rang. Jeff and the twins were on the living room floor surrounded by cardboard, markers and enough tape to wrap a building. Joe was meticulously drawing scales on the walls, while William constructed a treasure pile from aluminum foil. Natasha had been watching from the couch, her laptop forgotten, actually smiling at the chaos. When she opened the door and Jeff saw Simone Laurent standing there, his entire body went cold. "I need to talk to you," Simone said, looking past Natasha to where Jeff had frozen mid-tape pull. "Both of you!" Natasha's spine went rigid. "This isn't a good time. It's important, and it involves him." Simone gestured at Jeff. "Please, 5 minutes." The twins had gone quiet, sensing adult tension the way children always do. Natasha looked at Jeff, and he saw the exact moment she made the calculation. Whatever Simone had to say would be worse to hide than to hear. "Girls, go to your room for a few minutes," Natasha said quietly. "But the habitat," William started. "Now." They went, casting worried looks over their shoulders. Once their door clicked shut, Natasha stepped aside to let Simone in. The three of them stood in an awkward triangle in the small living room, the half-finished dragon habitat, a bizarre centerpiece to whatever disaster was about to unfold. "I'm pregnant," Simone said without preamble. "The baby is Jeff's. I'm about 3 months along." The words landed like a physical blow. Jeff felt the air leave his lungs. Natasha's face went absolutely white. "That's not possible," Jeff said. We didn't." "We did. Multiple times in the weeks before the wedding. You were there, Jeff. Don't pretend you don't remember." He did remember. Hollow, mechanical encounters where they'd gone through the motions because it was expected, where he'd been trying to convince himself he could make the marriage work, that he could be the man his family wanted, where he'd been thinking about Natasha the entire time and hating himself for it. "Why are you telling us this?" Natasha's voice was deadly calm. "Because Jeff deserves to know, and because you deserve to know before he figures out how to spin it." Simone looked at Jeff with something that might have been pity. "I don't want you back. Let me be clear about that. Our relationship was a transaction and I have no interest in reviving it. But I'm keeping this baby and I'm going to expect you to be involved as a father, not as my partner, just as this child's parent." "You could have told me privately," Jeff said, his voice barely working. "I could have, but I figured she'd rather hear it from me than from you after you'd had time to craft whatever explanation would hurt her least." Simone turned to Natasha. "I'm not your enemy. I'm not trying to get him back. I'm just trying to do the right thing for this baby, but I thought you should know what you're getting into if you're planning to let him back into your life." "Get out," Natasha said softly. "I'm sorry. Get out of my home." Simone left. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jeff tried to find words, any words, but Natasha spoke first. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "I didn't know." "But you knew you slept with her. You knew it was a possibility." "Natasha, please, you've been coming here for months, playing with my daughters, making me believe you'd changed, and the entire time you had a pregnant fiancée you never mentioned. Ex-fiancée, and I didn't know she was pregnant. I swear to God I didn't know." Natasha laughed, and it was the most broken sound Jeff had ever heard. "Does it matter? You slept with her, while you were already trying to get back into my life, while you were supposedly proving you'd changed. It was before the wedding, before I saw you again, before I knew about Joe and William. So what? So it's okay because you didn't know about us yet? You were still engaged to someone else, Jeff. You were still building a life with her while sleeping with her. That's who you are. That's who you've always been. Someone who hedges his bets. Someone who keeps his options open. That's not fair." "Fair?" Natasha's voice rose. "You want to talk about fair? I tried to believe you'd changed. I let my daughters get attached to you. I let myself start to—" She cut herself off. And now I find out you're about to have a baby with another woman. I didn't plan this. I didn't want this. But it's happening anyway. And now you're going to have 3 children with 2 different women, and you expect me to what? Be okay with it? Except that you're going to be co-parenting with your ex-fiancé while also trying to be a father to my girls. Yes, because I don't have a choice. I can't change what happened with Simone, but I can choose how I handle it going forward. By lying to me for months. I wasn't lying. I didn't know. You knew you slept with her. You knew it was recent enough that a pregnancy was possible. And you didn't think that was something I needed to know. Jeff had no answer that wouldn't make it worse. Natasha was right. Even if he hadn't known about the pregnancy, he should have told her about Simone, about the sex, the complications, the fact that his previous life was messy and unfinished. I'm sorry, he said helplessly. Sorry. Natasha's hands were shaking. You're sorry. Like that fixes anything. Like that makes me capable of trusting you again. What do you want me to do? I want you to leave. Natasha. I want you to walk out that door and let me figure out how to explain to my daughters why the father they were just starting to trust is about to have a baby with someone else. I want you to give me space to remember why letting you into our lives was a mistake from the beginning. Don't say that. Please don't say that. Why not? It's true. Every time I start to believe you've changed, you prove you're still the same man, the man who keeps secrets, the man who prioritizes his own comfort over everyone else's truth. The man who walked away from me once and will walk away again the second it gets too complicated. I'm not walking away. Yes, you are. I'm telling you to leave, right now, before my daughters come out and see me falling apart. Jeff looked toward the closed bedroom door, where Joe and William were probably listening to every word. Then he looked at Natasha, at the woman he loved more than anything, standing in her living room with tears she wouldn't let fall and walls rebuilding faster than he could fight them down. Can I still see them? Joe and William? I don't know. Natasha, please, whatever you think of me, they need a father they can trust. I'm not convinced that's you anymore. She opened the door. Leave, please, just leave. He left because staying would only hurt her more. He sat in his car outside her building and watched the lights in her apartment. Watched shadows move across the windows, Natasha talking to the twins probably, explaining, doing damage control, protecting them from him again. His phone rang. Simone. I'm sorry I did it that way, she said without greeting. But you needed to tell her, and I knew you wouldn't. You'd wait until you found the perfect moment, the perfect words. There is no perfect moment for news like this. You destroyed everything I'd been building with her. No, you destroyed it when you slept with me. I just forced you to deal with the consequences. She was right. He'd been so focused on proving himself to Natasha, on showing her he'd changed, that he'd compartmentalized everything about Simone. He'd treated their relationship like it was erased by the cancelled wedding, like sleeping with his fiancée before he knew about his other children was somehow acceptable because the timelines didn't overlap. But intentions didn't matter. Actions did. And his actions had created a situation where he was about to have 3 children with 2 women, and both women had every reason not to trust him. What do you want from me? Jeff asked Simone. I want you to be a father to this baby, not perfect, just present. Can you do that? I don't know. I don't even know if Natasha will let me see Joe and William anymore after this. Then you fix it. You find a way to be a father to all 3 of your children, even if it's messy and complicated and nothing like what you imagined. How? I don't know, Jeff, but you better figure it out fast, because in 6 months, you're going to have a newborn who needs you, and 2 daughters who might have learned that their father is exactly as unreliable as they feared. She hung up. Jeff sat in his car as evening fell around him, the city continuing its indifferent existence while his life fell apart for the second time in as many years. He'd lost Natasha once by choosing wrong. Now he'd lost her again by not being honest about the complications of his past. And this time, he didn't know if there was any path back. His phone buzzed with a text from Joe, sent from Natasha's phone. "Mom says you have to go away for a while. Why?" Jeff stared at those words and felt something crack open in his chest. How did he explain to a 6-year-old that her father was about to have a baby with someone else? How did he make that make sense when he couldn't make sense of it himself? He typed back, "Because I made a mistake before I knew you and William existed, and now that mistake is having consequences. But I'm still your dad. I'm still going to be here for you." Joe's response came quickly. "You said you wouldn't leave. You promised." "I'm not leaving. I'm just giving your mom space to be angry at me, because she has a right to be angry." "Will you come back?" Jeff looked up at Natasha's window and saw her silhouette against the light, saw her standing with her phone, probably reading his messages to Joe, deciding whether to let this conversation continue. "I will always come back, no matter what. I promise." "You promised before, and you left." The message felt like a knife between his ribs, because Joe was right. He'd made promises before, to Natasha, to himself, and broken them the moment they became inconvenient. Why should his daughters believe him now? He had no good answer, so he sent the only truth he had. "You're right, I did. But this time is different because this time I know what I'm losing. And I'll fight to not lose it, even if it takes years. Even if you're angry at me. Even if your mom never forgives me. I'll fight." No response came. Jeff waited, but his phone stayed silent. Eventually, the light in Natasha's apartment went out, and he knew the conversation was over. He drove home through city streets that felt lonelier than they ever had, past buildings full of people whose lives hadn't imploded, whose choices hadn't cost them everything twice. In his apartment, the dragon habitat materials were still spread across his living room floor. He picked up one of Joe's drawings, a detailed dragon with elaborate scales and fierce eyes, and put it on his refrigerator. Then he sat on his couch and tried to figure out how to be a father to 3 children when he'd barely figured out how to be a father to 2. The path forward wasn't clear. Natasha might never let him see the twins again. Simone was having his baby whether he was ready or not. Joe and William were learning that their father was exactly as unreliable as their mother had warned them. Everything he'd built over months of park benches and dragon books was collapsing under the weight of complications he'd created before he'd known to be better. But giving up wasn't an option, because somewhere in this city, 2 little girls were going to sleep tonight, wondering if their father was leaving again. And 6 months from now, a baby would be born who'd need a father, whether Jeff knew how to be one or not. So Jeff did the only thing he knew how to do anymore. He made a plan. He'd show up. He'd be honest. He'd fight for all 3 of his children, even if it meant juggling 2 complicated co-parenting relationships and 0 romantic prospects. He'd prove to Natasha that he could handle this, that he could be present for their daughters while also being responsible for Simone's baby. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be clean. But nothing worth having ever was. He texted Natasha one last time. "I know you're angry. I know I deserve it. But when you're ready to talk about how we move forward, I'll be here, for as long as it takes." The message showed as read, but no response came. Jeff turned off his phone, lay down on his couch and stared at the ceiling where shadows from streetlights made patterns he couldn't interpret. And he waited for morning, when he'd wake up and start the work of proving himself all over again. Because that's what love looked like now. Not romantic gestures or passionate declarations, just the grinding, unglamorous work of showing up for your children even when their mothers had every reason to tell you to leave. Even when you'd made mistakes you couldn't undo. Even when the path forward required you to be better than you'd ever been before. And Jeff Wildman had spent his entire life being less than he could have been. But for his daughters, all three of them, he'd find a way to be more. Chapter 9. The Impossible Choice. Natasha didn't contact Jeff for 3 weeks. He continued his consulting work, attended appointments with Simone to prove he was committed to being involved with the baby, and checked his phone obsessively for any message from Joe or William. None came. He sent weekly texts. Thinking about you both, love, Dad. They went unanswered. In the 4th week, Natasha finally called. They've been asking about you, constantly. I can't keep putting them off. Let me see them, please. Under supervision only, and we need to talk first about how you're going to handle this situation with Simone. They met at a coffee shop, neutral ground where Natasha could leave whenever she wanted. She looked exhausted, her eyes carrying shadows that hadn't been there before. Jeff felt the weight of knowing he'd put those shadows there. How are they really? Jeff asked. Confused, hurt. Joe asked me if you're replacing them with a new baby. William asked if you stopped loving them because they're not good enough. Each word felt like taking a hammer to his chest. God, Natasha. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to see them. You're going to explain in age-appropriate terms that you're having another baby with someone else, but that it doesn't change how you feel about them. And then you're going to prove it by showing up consistently for them while also handling your responsibilities to Simone's baby. I can do that. Can you? Because, Jeff, I've watched single parents try to juggle multiple children with multiple partners. It's exhausting and complicated, and someone always gets hurt, usually the kids. I won't hurt them. You already have. Now you're just trying to minimize the damage. She stirred her coffee without drinking it. I'm allowing this because they need their father. Not because I trust you. Not because I forgive you. Because they need you. And I won't let my anger deprive them of that. What about us? There is no us. There was almost an us. But that ended when I found out you'd slept with your fiancé while trying to win me back. I wasn't trying to win you back then. I didn't even know you were in the city. That was before... It doesn't matter. The timeline doesn't matter. What matters is you're about to be co-parenting with 2 women, and I can't be the third complication in your life. I have to focus on Joe and William. You're not a complication. You're... Jeff, stop. Please stop trying to fix this. Just be their father. That's all I can handle right now. She left before he could argue. The supervised visit happened 2 days later, and it was brutal. The twins were shy again, guarded in ways they hadn't been in months. Jeff tried to explain about the baby, but the words came out wrong and insufficient. Is the new baby going to live with you? Joe asked. Sometimes. I'll split time between all of you. So you won't always be here when we need you. I'll always be here when you need me. It might just be more complicated to arrange. Everything with you is complicated, Joe said, and the observation was so accurate it hurt. William was quieter, clinging to Natasha more than usual. When Jeff tried to engage him in play, he participated but without his usual enthusiasm. The damage was visible, measurable, and entirely Jeff's fault. After the visit, Natasha walked him to his car. They'll adjust, she said, but she didn't sound convinced. Will you? I'm not the one who needs to adjust. I'm exactly where I've always been, protecting my daughters from being hurt by someone who's supposed to love them. She crossed her arms. The difference is, now I have proof I was right to be protective. Jeff drove to Simone's apartment for a doctor's appointment. She was showing now, her pregnancy visible in ways that made it impossible to pretend this wasn't happening. In the waiting room, other couples sat together holding hands, looking excited or nervous, but united. Jeff and Simone sat with careful space between them, co-parents but not partners, managing a situation neither had wanted. How are the twins handling it? Simone asked. Not well. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I didn't mean to make things harder with Natasha. I know. You were right to tell her. I should have done it myself. The ultrasound showed a boy, healthy, developing normally, due in early spring. Jeff watched the screen and felt the same rush of love he'd felt seeing Joe and William, but it was tangled with guilt and fear and the overwhelming sense that he was failing everyone. "What are you going to name him?" Jeff asked afterwards. "I was thinking Kit, simple, strong." Simone glanced at him. "Unless you have preferences. Kit's perfect." They made plans for the birth, discussed logistics, signed documents that formalized custody arrangements before the baby even existed. It was all very civilized and completely heartbreaking because this should have been joy, and instead it was just complicated. Jeff was driving home when Autumn called. "Dad's in the hospital. Heart attack. It's bad." He was there within 20 minutes. His father lay in a sterile room hooked to machines, looking smaller than Jeff had ever seen him. Corinne sat beside the bed holding Sterling's hand, and when she saw Jeff in the doorway, her face crumpled. "He's been asking for you." Jeff approached slowly. His father's eyes opened, and despite the oxygen mask, Sterling managed to speak. "Stubborn," he rasped, "just like me." "Save your strength, Dad." No strength left to save. Sterling's hand reached for Jeff's. "Proud of you. Should have said it before. Proud you chose them." "Dad, the company's gone. Doesn't matter. You were right. They matter. Your girls matter." Tears were streaming down Jeff's face. "I'm sorry for all of it. For letting you down. Didn't let me down. Showed me what strength looks like, what love looks like." Sterling's grip tightened. "Be their father. All of them, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "I'm trying. Try harder. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you're dying to say what matters." Sterling closed his eyes. The machines beeped steadily. Corinne sobbed quietly. Jeff stood holding his father's hand while Autumn cried in the corner. And for the first time in his life, his father had told him he was proud. Sterling died that night. Jeff was there, along with his mother and sister. The man who'd built an empire, who'd manipulated his son's life, who'd ultimately sided with his wife's prejudices over his son's happiness. He died holding Jeff's hand and asking forgiveness he didn't deserve, but received anyway. The funeral was huge. Business associates, family friends, people who'd known Sterling for decades. Jeff stood beside his mother and sister and accepted condolences from people who'd watched his life implode at the wedding. Some were sympathetic. Others were clearly there for the spectacle. All of them were witnesses to the Wildman family's spectacular fall from grace. Natasha came to the funeral. She stood in the back with Joe and William, and when Jeff saw them, something in his chest unlocked. His daughters were there at his father's funeral because Natasha understood that grief transcended their complications. After the service, Joe and William approached him carefully. "Are you sad?" William asked. "Very sad. We brought you this." Joe held out a drawing, a dragon with an old man riding on its back, flying toward clouds. "So Grandpa Sterling has a dragon to ride in heaven." Jeff couldn't speak. He just pulled them both into a hug while Natasha watched from a respectful distance. When he looked up at her, she wasn't smiling, but she wasn't completely closed off either. There was something softer in her expression, something that recognized shared grief, shared humanity, the reality that life was complicated and painful for everyone. "Thank you for bringing them," Jeff said when he released the twins. "They wanted to come, to support you." Natasha hesitated. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing." "You're allowed to not be okay, you know. You just lost your father." "I lost him years ago. I'm just mourning what we could have been if he'd been different. If I'd been different." Natasha looked at him for a long moment, and Jeff saw something shift in her eyes. Not forgiveness, but maybe understanding that he was drowning in multiple kinds of loss, and she was the only person who knew all of them. The twins can stay with you tonight, if you want, if you need not to be alone. Are you sure? No, but I'm offering anyway. That night, Jeff's daughters stayed in his apartment. They built a blanket fort and ate pizza and didn't talk about death or complicated families or anything heavy. They just existed together, and it was the first peace Jeff had felt since Simone had walked into Natasha's living room. When Natasha picked them up the next morning, she lingered at the door. They needed this, being with you during something hard, seeing that you need them too. I always need them. I know. I'm starting to believe that. She adjusted her purse strap. Jeff, I can't promise anything. About us, about forgiveness. But I can promise I won't keep them from you. Whatever else happens, you're their father. And last night proved you're trying to be a good one. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't love. But it was Natasha acknowledging that he was showing up, that he was trying, that maybe the man he was becoming was worth the risk of letting into her daughters' lives permanently. Jeff stood in his doorway and watched them leave, Natasha and Joe and William walking toward their car in morning sunlight, and he felt something he hadn't felt since the wedding. Hope, not certainty, not confidence that everything would work out, just the smallest possibility that if he kept showing up, kept trying, kept proving himself day after day, maybe he could build something worth having from all this wreckage. His phone buzzed. Simone, doctor says Kit's very active today. Thought you'd want to know. Jeff looked at the message, then at Natasha's car pulling away. 2 women, 3 children, a life more complicated than anything he'd imagined. No easy answers, no simple path forward. Just the grinding work of being present for everyone who needed him, even when presence meant splitting himself into pieces. He texted back to Simone, "Thanks for telling me. I'll call later to check in." Then he went inside and started planning next week's visit with Joe and William. Started researching how to build healthy relationships with children in blended families. Started accepting that his life would never be simple or clean, but that didn't mean it couldn't be good. Because somewhere between park benches and dragon books, between funeral drawings and blanket forts, between supervised visits and complicated co-parenting arrangements, Jeff had figured out what his father meant in those final moments. Being a parent wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, even when you'd failed, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And Jeff Wildman, who'd spent years choosing the easy path, was finally learning how to walk the difficult one. Not because he'd become a better person overnight, but because his daughters deserved a father who tried. All 3 of them, and trying was the only thing he had left to offer. Chapter 10. The Future Built on Ruins. Kit arrived on a Tuesday morning in early spring when the world was turning green again. Jeff was with Joe and William at the aquarium when Simone called. He looked at his daughters examining jellyfish tanks and felt the familiar terror of being split between worlds. But when he called Natasha to explain, she simply said, "Go. They'll understand." He knelt down to the twins. "I have to go help Simone. The baby's coming." William's face lit up. "We're getting a brother today." "Looks like it." Joe was quieter. "Are you scared?" "Terrified. You were scared when we first met you too." "I'm still scared of messing up with you too." Joe considered this. "But you keep showing up anyway." "That's what being a dad means." She hugged him suddenly, fiercely. "Then go show up for Kit too. We'll be okay." Natasha arrived as he was leaving. In the parking lot, she caught his arm. "You're shaking." "I don't know how to do this. Be there for him while still being there for them." "You'll probably fail somebody sometimes. That's parenthood. The trick is you keep trying." She released his arm. "Go meet your son." Kit Sterling Wildman came into the world at 6 pounds, 4 ounces, with his father holding Simone's hand and crying harder than she was. When they placed him in Jeff's arms, he felt the same overwhelming love he'd felt meeting Joe and William. Simone looked exhausted, but peaceful. He's perfect. He is. How are you going to do this? 3 kids, 2 mothers, 1 confused life? Very carefully, and probably badly at first, but I'll figure it out. Jeff stayed until Simone fell asleep, then drove to Natasha's apartment. It was late, past the twins' bedtime, but he'd promised to tell them about their brother. Natasha opened the door in pajamas. They're still awake, refused to sleep until they knew Kit was okay. Joe and William ambushed him with questions. What did Kit look like? Was he tiny? Could they meet him? Jeff answered everything, showed photos, watched their excitement war with uncertainty. Do you love him more than us? Joe asked quietly when William had run to get his stuffed animals. No, I love you all differently, but not more or less. You're my daughters. Kit's my son. You're all my children. But you live with him. You get to see him every day. Right now, yes, because he's brand new. But I see you every week, and as Kit gets older, we'll all spend time together. You'll be big sisters. Joe processed this. It's weird. Having a baby brother we'll only see sometimes. A lot of families look weird from the outside. That doesn't make them less real. William returned with stuffed animals. They talked until the twins could barely keep their eyes open, and when Jeff tucked them in, Joe whispered, I'm glad you're our dad, even though it's complicated. I'm glad I'm your dad too. In the living room, Natasha had made coffee. They sat on opposite ends of her couch, but everything felt different now, softer. How was it? Intense, beautiful, terrifying. That's parenthood. Natasha sipped her coffee. You handled telling them well. I'm learning. Slowly. That's the only way. She set down her cup. Jeff, I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen. Okay. I've been watching you these past months. Watching you show up for Joe and William while preparing for Kit. Watching you handle your father's death and your mother's rejection. Watching you become the father you should have been. She paused. And somewhere in all that, I stopped being angry. Jeff's heart hammered. What are you now? Scared, because I'm starting to remember what it felt like to love you, and I don't know if I can survive loving you again and being wrong. You're not wrong about me. How can either of us know? You slept with Simone. You kept secrets. I've also proven I'm capable of learning, of being better, of choosing differently when it counts. Natasha pulled her knees to her chest. I watched you hold Kit today in those photos, and I felt this mess of emotions, jealousy that Simone gets parts of your life I'll never have, relief that I don't have to navigate that, fear that you'll never have space for me. There's always space for you. But what does that look like? You co-parenting with Simone, co-parenting with me, trying to build some relationship with me in between? Then we build something new. Something that's never existed before, something messy but real. I don't know how to build that. Neither do I, but we could figure it out together, if you're willing to try. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. Joe asked me last week if I still loved you. I told her love isn't always enough, that sometimes people love each other but can't be together. She asked why not. And I didn't have a good answer. All I had were excuses about trust and fear. But none of those are good reasons to keep myself away from someone I never stopped loving. You never stopped loving me? No. I tried. But every time you showed up for our daughters, every time you proved you were changing, I fell a little bit more back in love with the man you're becoming. Jeff couldn't breathe. What does that mean? It means I'm terrified. It means I don't trust this. It means I'm probably making a mistake. But it also means I'm willing to try, slowly, carefully, with boundaries and therapy. I'll take slow. I'll take whatever you're willing to give. I'm not moving in with you. I'm not jumping into fantasy. I'm just saying I'm willing to see if we can build something real from all this wreckage. That's more than I deserve. It's exactly what you've earned. She set down her cup. You've spent months proving you're serious about being a father. Now you have to prove you're serious about being a partner. Can you do that? I can try. I'll probably mess up. You'll definitely mess up. But so will I. That's being human. The question is whether we can mess up and still choose each other. Jeff moved closer, and Natasha didn't retreat. I choose you. I chose you 6 years ago, even though I was too weak to fight for it. I choose you now, and I'll choose you every day after if you'll let me. Show me, she said softly. Don't tell me. Show me. So he did. Not with a kiss, but by pulling out his phone and showing her his calendar. Every week blocked for Joe and William. Every other week for Kit. Doctor's appointments, school events, time with Simone to co-parent. And scattered throughout, time marked simply as Natasha. This is my life now, he said. Complicated, messy, full of people who need me, but there's space for you in it if you want there to be, as a priority. Natasha studied his calendar, and when she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. You scheduled me like I matter. You're the only thing that's ever mattered. I was just too stupid to realize it. You're still stupid, just slightly less stupid. I'll take slightly less stupid. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and it was the first time in 6 years they'd been this close without walls. This is going to be so hard, Jeff. Blending families, managing relationships with Simone, helping the twins adjust, figuring out if we can be partners. I know. We might fail. We might. But we might also build something beautiful, something real, something worth all the pain it took to get here. She lifted her head to look at him. I'm not going to say I forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm willing to build a future that doesn't require forgiveness. Just acceptance that we're both flawed humans trying to do better. That's all I'm asking for. Then okay, let's try, slowly, with realistic expectations. Best offer I've had all year, she almost smiled. Your year's been terrible. It's been the hardest year of my life, and the most important, because it's the year I finally became the person Joe and William deserve. And Kit. And Kit. Jeff took her hand carefully. And maybe someday, the person you deserve. Maybe someday. 3 months later, at a park on a Saturday afternoon, Jeff watched all 3 of his children together for the first time. Joe and William were teaching Kit, held in Simone's arms, about clouds and dragons. Natasha stood next to Jeff, their hands loosely linked, while Simone chatted with them about Kit's schedule. It was awkward. It was unconventional. It was nothing like the family Jeff had imagined. But it was theirs. Broken pieces glued back together into something that didn't match the original, but might be stronger for it. You were my past, Jeff, Natasha said quietly, watching their daughters with their baby brother. You were my biggest mistake and my greatest loss, but maybe you could be my future too. Not the future I planned, the one we're building day by day. Jeff squeezed her hand. Then let's keep building. Together. And they did. Slowly, carefully, with setbacks and successes and all the messy reality of 2 people learning to trust each other again while raising children in a complicated family. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was honest. And after years of lies, honesty felt like the greatest gift. The story didn't end with a wedding or neat resolution. It ended with a Saturday in the park, with children laughing and parents trying, with the understanding that love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, again and again, even when it was hard. And Jeff Wildman, who'd spent his life choosing comfort over courage, was finally learning how to choose love. Messy, complicated, hard-won love, the only kind worth having.